There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn of Shawn Breathes Books, and this is another episode of Zooming In, which is an occasional series where I talk to bookish social media luminaries the world over. And today is definitely the world over, or the world under, about bookish literary topics, jumping off articles online. And I'd like to welcome back for his second appearance in the series and maybe 211th appearance on my channel, Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, joining us from Australia. Scott,
Hello.
hello.
Thank you for having me again, Shawn.
Well, you know how much I've always wanted to have you. So we're here to talk about a pair of articles that really go together nicely. They're both about offloading, getting rid of books, both literally in terms of trashing them, throwing them into the waste paper basket, and just getting rid of them more generally speaking. The first one is from Salon. Books are trash too. Remember to throw them away during spring cleaning, by D. Watkins. That's from April of this year. The other one is from the Canadian magazine, The Walrus. Yes, it's okay to throw away a book, by Michelle Sisa, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And that was also in April. So where should we get started? I think I'm just going to ask you for your overarching response to this topic in these articles.
Well, I mean, I think there's like a physical reason we have to throw out books. There is a spatial reason, but it should be done very sparingly, is my sort of general feeling of it. Like, I'm all for throwing out books, and I think it was the Salon article that talked about having an eBay for Dummies book and throwing that out, and I'm all, well, of course you
1981 or something. Yeah.
that's it. Like, yes, get rid of the absolute trash, but don't throw out something, don't throw out a classic or something like or a book you've loved or something like that. It's
I can see maybe a few gaps in your bookshelves. So have you done some culling recently? Or
um
you just got a bunch of pile of the books on the floor?
there's a bit of unorganization, but like we can see there's still some double stacking going on as
Oh,
well.
double stacking. Wow.
It's just a disorganized bookshelf, to be honest.
Well, I've got quite a few like that as well. So is it easy for you to, and we're talking more generally about getting rid of books. We're going to talk about throwing them in the trash and then the related one of actually just putting them in the recycle bin. Those are two things that we're going to talk about really in a precise way. But right now we're just talking about getting them out of your house. Is it easy for you to get rid of books?
No, no, it's very difficult. Books, there's always a sort of a emotional connection, isn't there? I mean, if I've not read the book or if I hated the book, then it's different. Then it's easy to get rid of the book. If it's like if I find an old uni textbook and I didn't think much of the subject or whatever, I can get rid of those books easy. But if I loved a book, or even if I used to love a book, if it's like I've got famous 5 books from when I was a child that I loved when I was, you know, 35 or something. No, but I can't throw out the childhood great books that I loved when I was a little person.
As you know better than most, I got rid of a lot of books when I moved from Tokyo back to Canada. And you and Nell took a bunch of them. I offered them to my bookish friends, any of the ones that I didn't want. If you would pay my postage, I would ship them to you, and you got a couple, 2 or 3 boxes out of that.
Yeah, we did
And
quite
how
well
many
out
of
of it.
them have you gotten rid of? Hmm?
I have not got rid of one of them, Sean. I
That's
suppose the flip side of this is about buying books as well, because over the last few years, I've moved away from reading physical books. I've always read a lot of audiobooks, but now if I'm reading a physical copy of a book, it's an ebook. I very rarely add a physical book to my collection now, and I
okay.
use the library as well.
How recent has this changed, and how drastic has it been in terms of a rough estimate of what percentage you have reduced the physical acquisition of books compared to before?
I don't think I've bought a single physical book this year. I have bought ebooks and audiobooks this year, but not a single physical book. and the only physical books I've read have been from the library.
Well,
Yeah,
very dramatic. And how much of a change was that?
it's sort of it happened gradually, and it wasn't a conscious choice. It wasn't anti-consumerist or waste it was sort of the new generation of having to have stuff now. I can buy an ebook and I can read it within 5 minutes. I can do that with an audiobook. A physical book, I either got to wait for it to ship or I've got to drive out to the bookshop. I just find that so much more satisfying and so much easier.
I have not experienced that change, although I still consume a lot of audiobooks, especially in tandem with the text. But I almost never buy an ebook anymore. So I've gone as a booktuber, I feel I have to have the physical book to hold up. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
No.
It's crazy.
If you look at my videos, you'll notice they slide across and they go into a certain spot and they're all from Google
They're all
regardless.
gifts, cover gifts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Has it changed how you feel about the books on your shelves? Like, do you still regularly pull them off the shelf to read them, or are you kind of just gravitated more towards electronic and audiobooks?
It has actually. I don't look at the physical books anymore. When I go to read a book, it's very much I've gotten used to reading. I read on my phone, and the first place I go is to my phone. It's to Libby, and then it's to Everand, and then it's to Kobo, and I have a sort of a chain of basically where they're least expensive to most expensive.
But in general, it's still difficult for you to part with physical books.
Yeah, it is. There's an emotional connection. There's two readers in my house is the other thing. So there's often the hope that, oh, I've got this book. I loved this book. I hope Nell will one day read it and read it before my memory of it fades so much that I can't have a conversation with her about it. It's nice to have those books around, even though I don't have the books that I've loved this year. I don't have them on the shelf.
And so if you've loved a book, you don't then go ahead and acquire it for your shelf because you loved it so much?
No, no,
Oh,
it's
interesting. Yeah, I have to. I have to have it. If I've done it
it's
as a library book or ebook or something, I have to have the physical copy.
that would be very expensive. Just, I mean, I guess reading is very expensive, isn't it? But
Well, it doesn't have to be. It absolutely doesn't have
yeah,
to be. So you're
that's
much more
exactly.
economical in the way that you go about it, and I think that's fascinating. You've talked about books that you've fallen out of love with, books that are outdated, like eBay for Beginners from 1997 or whatever. What other criteria do you use to get rid of books off your shelves?
I think the other one would be damage. The book. If I love the book, it doesn't matter how badly damaged it is. But if you've got a book, and especially maybe you got it from a little free library and it's been read half a dozen times before, and it's starting to curl at the ears, and those things that happen to books after they've been beaten around the block a bit. It's much easier to get rid of an ugly book than it is a pretty book. That's
That's kind of like romantic partners, right? Um, I really had a problem with a lot of things in the salon.com article. I don't know who Dee Watkins is, but she said a lot of things that made my blood boil. The one that was the most, and I'm wondering if you and I will connect on this or not. Your bookshelf should be beautiful enough to make it onto somebody else's Pinterest page.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about Pinterest, but I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. But she goes on. You shouldn't have a bookshelf that has nothing but books. You need a cute little woven basket or a little statue from your ceramics class, or maybe that plaque you got from work, from being employee of the month or something. But you got to spice it up. You got to make it look good, and you're not going to do it if you're holding on to that celebrity memoir that you're never going to open again. Oh, that is just sacrilege.
Bookshelves are extensions of your personality, I think.
Absolutely.
And if your personality is to put a woven basket on there, albeit, but if your personality is to have a cluttered bookshelf with all sorts of moth-filled books from that's that says a lot about you too.
And I should make a distinction, because what she's saying is that you should not have books, that you should have a space to put something in between the books, like not in front of the books. That's my reading of this. Like, I actually judge people who put anything in front of their books on their bookshelf. I think it's just disgusting. But to actually not have books on the shelf and put something in between them, oh my God, that's just beyond the pale.
Yes. Like, if you don't have enough books, if you're lucky enough to have more shelf than you have books, maybe you're a new reader.
It just shows that she's not a serious. Somebody who does that is not a serious reader. Or I mean, that's judgy on my part. You are one of the most serious readers, most dedicated, voracious readers I know, and most of your books are not physical books that you own. So there's other ways to be serious readers, absolutely. But your bookshelf should be beautiful enough to make it on something or other. Pinterest, oh my God. I notice your books aren't color coordinated, so it's reassuring.
No, I think I will be happy if my bookshelf is always a mess, because that's sort of how I view bookshelves. And that says a lot about my personality. It's sort of a cluttered joy of surprises. It's not a Pinterest pretty bookshelf, but I think it's pretty enough. People come in and look at it and go, wow.
There's many ways to get rid of books. You can take them to the used bookstore and hope to get something in trade or get some cash. You can donate them to a thrift store. You could put them in recycling or actually throw them into the trash. So let's focus on recycling books as paper products and actually throwing them into the trash. Have you ever done either of those?
Um, I have, but rarely. It's usually when the book is damaged. The last one I threw out was an atlas I had when I was a child, when I think it was my very first atlas when I was 6, and it was in multiple pieces. The spine had completely disintegrated. You'd start in Brazil, and the other side of the page, you'd be in China or something. It was just so beaten up and so useless. And also, atlases get out of date. Like any one of these books here, if I didn't want it, I would little free library rather than trash. I wouldn't trash them. But if it's damaged, that's different.
In the article in The Walrus by Michelle Sisa, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, she talks about that it's not really fair to just dump boxes of books that are like old telephone books or out of date books that nobody's ever going to want at the thrift stores, because they just have to throw them out themselves.
You've got to put in the thrift store things that other people are going to spend money on, even if it's only a couple of dollars.
Absolutely. So this is all for me right now, because we're not closing out the farm, but we are kind of doing a whole bunch of sorting and whatnot at the farm where I grew up. The hired man's suite up above the shop, where books have been dumped for decades and decades. So when my grandparents moved off the farm, their library went up there, and that's most of it. A lot of my books and university textbooks and all kinds of, every time there was a move or somebody died, their library went up there. So there's a whole bunch of books up there, and they weren't properly looked after. Like, they were just put on shelves and got neglected for 20 or 30 or 40 years, and so they're dusty and curled and bent out of shape, and I'm charged with sorting through those and deciding what to do with them. So I have to say that most of them are going into the trash, because they're just not in any shape that anybody, even if they were interested in them, would want to read them or pick them up or hold them. They're so dirty and dusty and bent out of shape. So I feel bad about that, and I suppose I should find a way to recycle them, but with all the other projects going on at the farm, I'm just not going to worry about them. So I'm dumping boxes of them over the balcony into a big garbage disposal, and they're just going to the landfill. But there are a lot of the ones, especially in the house, that we've managed to donate to thrift stores or even trade in for store credit at used bookstores. But the old books, you think on one level they should be worth something, like a novel from 1921, but they're all worth about $1. Like, nobody wants them.
Yeah, unless you know, a signed first edition of, I don't know, Steinbeck or who else was writing in 21, you know, something like that, that'd be worth a heap,
Absolutely.
but
I'm checking each one of them and checking if they're valuable and checking their condition and stuff. So there are exceptions, but 95% so far are just going into the landfill, and I'm not losing too much sleep over it.
I think a lot of this comes by we wanna be less consumeristic, but we also want to support the book industry, and it's this double-edged sword, so to speak. It's a product of the society that we live in. There's so many different aspects here, but I mean, ultimately, I guess we want to support authors and we want to make sure that you can make money writing books, and we want to make sure that publishers can employ editors and publicists and all of the wonderful people that make reading possible. We want to make sure it's a healthy industry as readers. But at the same time, we're thrifty and we're environmental and we don't want waste. And we can't win, can we?
No, there's a lot of competing priorities, and I usually definitely, as I've already confessed and talked about at length, tend to err on the side of, acquiring the physical book and getting rid of it if I don't want it. You were talking about getting rid of books you hate. Some of the books that I hate the most, I keep because I know that I'm going to be forever talking about them on future videos. So I still have them.
I must confess, I have a copy of American Psycho that whenever I think about throwing a book or abusing a book, I always think of that book just because I hated it so much.
Out of curiosity, if you ever had any J.K. Rowling books, what did you do with them?
I did have some books, and I wrote a little note in the front of them explaining that she was a TERF and a horribly damaged human with very repugnant views. And then I donated them to a little free library so that whoever picked them up would be forced to read the little note and, I don't know, have some
Yeah,
sort of.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, no, that's genius. I think I did something very similar. Did you hear about the scandal with Greg Mortenson? He was creating schools for girls in Afghanistan, but he was a complete shyster. Like it was fraud.
Oh, no, I
And he
didn't.
became so famous, he wrote a memoir called Three Cups of Tea about his work. And then there was an expose a few years later. But in the meantime, Obama had donated the proceeds of his Nobel Peace Prize to this charity, to this school. And the guy was a total, like, he did build one or two schools, but he took all the rest of the money and put it in his pocket.
Wow.
I had read his books and I had his book. It was a gift from my mom. And so I think I might have done the same thing. I either threw it in the trash or I did write something in it. I can't remember now, but yeah, I didn't want that one to circulate without a warning.
Yeah, and I mean, J.K. Rowling's is an example that I think most people know about, but there are some really horrible things that I mean, there's a lot of authors out there, and you have that many people in one place, you're bound to have some horrible people in there as well, aren't you?
My one weird thing that does happen to me, whenever I get rid of a book within 7 to 10 days, I want it again. Like there's some reason why I want it, and it's gone. That happens every freaking time.
Throw her out as remorse.
So I'm not asking you to send me all the books I sent to you back, but if you offered, I might take you up on it.
Take a few of them back, yeah. And you have
Yes.
so many books that you can't get to is the other thing, because we do buy more books than we can possibly read, and sometimes you make the decision of, oh well, this was 5 years ago, this is a different person, I'm no longer into this sort of fiction.
Absolutely. And so I have a thing that I do every year. This is the second year I've done it, where I pick a stack of books that don't typically fit into readathons or into the reading tastes of my regular buddy readers that have been sitting on my shelf for a long time. And then I make a video in January that if I don't read these books this year or bail on them or deal with them in some way, then at the end of the year I have to unhaul them. I have to get rid of them. And that's
Shelf,
been a fun project, actually. Yeah.
because I think with booktube we do fall into these reading habits of Jane Austen July and nonfiction November and whatever, the Irish readathon and so on and so forth.
Scott's Australian readathon. What is it called? I've forgotten the name of it.
Australia September.
why don't we close with the quote from the article in the Walrus, which to me was the vastly superior of the two articles.
Yeah, I agree.
At the end of the day, a book is just paper and ink and glue. Its soul is something else entirely, less tangible but more enduring than an object on a shelf. And
Founded.
so Scott, I think, holds the intangible value of a book in high esteem, but doesn't necessarily have to have the object on his shelf, whereas I tend to mark its value to me as a reader by needing to have it on my shelf. So it's interesting perspectives on the same topic. Scott, thanks
Yeah.
so much for chatting with me about this.
Thanks for having me on your channel.